Commencer. Excellence, Madame la Ministre, Monsieur le représentant spécial du secrétaire général, Monsieur le secrétaire général du gouvernement, la République centrafricaine, Excellence, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to warmly welcome all members of the configuration, as well as our distinguished briefers from New York and Bangui, to our second virtual meeting of the Central African Republic configuration. As mentioned in the concept note, we will have the pleasure to hear from the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Central Africans abroad, Her Excellency Sylvie Baibo Timon. It is a pleasure to have you with us today, my dear sister. And also, we would like to welcome our brother and friend, SG Moncur Ndiaye, my dear friend, SG Alexander Zoueb, as well as the representative of the World Bank in Bangui, Mr. Han Fritters, and Ms. Eko Molina, head of the Women Leadership Network in the Central African Republic. Despite the already long list of speakers, we are pleased to have among us today representatives of 3 local NGOs. As it is often stated in various PBC meetings, it is very important to hear voices from the field to enhance our comprehension of the situation on the ground and adapt accordingly nature and scope of our support. I would also like to call your attention on the multiple documents shared with you in prevision of our meeting. Our aim is to give as much background information as possible. We hope that these documents were useful to prepare for this meeting, but also for Security Council members as the consultation on the Secretary General reports were held yesterday. Also, given the impossibility to have interpretation services, we will do our best to make sure that all participants can interact at ease. We therefore circulated in advance a non-official translation of the interventions that will be made in French. Additional translation will be shared on the chat box. Our meeting today is the culmination of a process launched last June when we held an expert-level meeting on the presidential, legislative, and local elections. When on the then on the 5th of October, another expert-level meeting addressed the situation regarding the rule of law as well as the socio-economic development. The 3 discussions were intended to inform the PBC in its advisory role of the Security Council. In this regard, I am pleased to announce that we circulated last Friday the first drafts of written advice, and we hope to send them formally to the President of the Security Council shortly ahead of the renewal of the MINUSCA's mandate. We received so far comment from only 1 delegation. Our intention is to hear from you during this meeting, and we encourage any comment or proposal in this regard to integrate them after the meeting and recirculate a revised version before putting the revised document under silence precedent. This meeting comes as well after the successful high-level meeting organized by the Secretary General on the 1st of October, during which Morocco intervened on behalf of the configuration. The meeting, which saw the participation of many ministers, was co-chaired by the President of the Republic himself, His Excellency Professor Faustin Arcand Touadéra. We deliberately decided to limit ourselves to the 3 topics that I mentioned for our meeting today in order to be more focused, efficient, and in line with the mandate of the PBC. Allow me, therefore, to address very briefly these 3 elements. The electoral process. The CAR configuration has been working on the preparatory process for election for more than 18 months now. Elections were already a significant part of the written advice submitted to the Security Council for the renewal of the MINUSCA's mandate in 2019. We were also engaged in advocating in favor of the UNDP Basket Fund. Despite our best efforts, combined with MINUSCA's and the country's teams, leadership in this regard. The budget for the presidential and legislative elections is still short of approximately 4 million US dollars. We take this opportunity to encourage all partners to keep requesting their respective capitals for support, given the importance of the upcoming elections for the future of the country, the first round of which are scheduled for 27 December. We will still need to continue our advocacy for the local elections scheduled for 2021. The gap for this election is still significant, reaching 17 million US dollars. The local election will be a unique opportunity to cement the peace building gains and the major achievements reached by the country this past years at the local level. It will also reinforce the government's effort to expand its authority on the entire territory. It is also worth mentioning that these elections were not held since 1988. I would like to congratulate the government of the Central African Republic for their sincere and strong engagement toward a successful electoral process. Despite all the challenges, the government remained committed under the able leadership of His Excellency Professor Faustin Archan Touadera, President of the Republic, to ensure that the elections respected the constitutional timelines. Notwithstanding the impact of the pandemic, the Electoral Code was amended to ensure the registration of the maximum of Central Africans. I'm also very pleased to learn that the level of registration of women reached 46%. It is also an opportunity to underline the tireless effort of SRSG, Monker Diaye, DSRSG, Dennis Brown, and their respective teams, all the personnel of MINUSCAs, and our brave peacekeepers, working day and night, weekends and days off to support to the best of their ability the government and Central African population. All the necessary measures from the security points of view were taken jointly by the government and the MINUSCA. However, I would like to echo SRSG DI in his address yesterday before the Security Council. Misinformation, campaigns, and political agitation cannot be tolerated, and we join our voice in calling all candidates to adhere to the Code of Good Conduct for the elections, as it was the case for the previous elections. Two, rule of law. On this front as well, I'm pleased to acknowledge the significant progress achieved so far. Despite the significant impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, important reforms of the justice sector were pursued. Key reforms started to bear their fruits, such as in the penitentiary system, the work of the special criminal courts, as well as on the reinforcement of the ordinary justice system. However, there is still a need for the international community to continue its support to police, justice, and corrections institutions, including special criminal courts, which requires additional international magistrates to be nominated by member states so that trials can start on 2021 as planned. I am confident that ASG Zoued will address these elements more in details in his intervention. Three, socioeconomic situation. Finally, the current socioeconomic situation in CAR, including implementation of the National Recovery and Peace Building Plan, RCPCA, and the impact of global challenges such as the COVID-19 pandemic on the country's socioeconomic outlook is another element to consider. The substantial support provided to the CAR is unprecedented, and the impact on the daily life on Central Africans is a reality. Major partners and international partners, such as the World Bank, the European Union, and others, are doing an excellent job that needs to be highlighted, appreciated, and supported. Indeed, concrete advances are being made across different sectors. The SCPCA was subsequently realigned to counteract the negative impacts of COVID-19 on the economy. It is also worth underscoring the evident interlinkages between peace, development, and humanitarian action in the CAR context. Dear colleagues, I would have linked to mention also the worrying humanitarian situation and unacceptable attacks on humanitarian personnel, the implementation of the peace agreement, and other important issues. But we will have many distinguished briefers, and I would like to give them the opportunity to expand more on the different topics selected for this meeting. Without further ado, I'm pleased to give the floor to my dear sister, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Central Africa. My dear sister, you have the floor. Do you hear me?
Oui.
Ouais, vous avez la parole.
Très bien, merci. Okay, I can speak in French?
Yes, of course.
Okay, thank you. Monsieur l'ambassadeur, président de la configuration de la Commission pour la consolidation de la paix en République centrafricaine, mon très cher frère Omar, monsieur le représentant spécial du secrétaire général des Nations Unies, mon frère, mon cœur. J'ai vu également qu'était présent parmi nous le ministre du secrétaire général du gouvernement. Très cher frère, bonjour. Distingués invités en vos rangs et grades. Mesdames et messieurs, en prélude du renouvellement de la MINUSCA, il est important pour le gouvernement centrafricain, à travers sa représentation, de participer, et à travers également ma voix, la voix que je porte au nom du gouvernement, de participer à ce type de réunion, à cette séance, et je vous en remercie grandement, afin d'échanger et de partager un point de vue commun sur le processus de consolidation de la paix en République centrafricaine. En effet, lorsque nous abordons la question liée à la consolidation de la paix en République centrafricaine, il y a lieu de faire référence aux engagements du gouvernement clairement exprimés à travers la réforme du secteur de la sécurité, le renforcement de l'état de droit à travers la justice, l'élèvement socio-économique et l'organisation des prochaines élections électorales. Dans le cadre de la réforme du secteur de sécurité, communément appelée RSS, la démobilisation, le désarmement, la réintégration et le rapatriement pour le DDRR. Nous avons également la réconciliation nationale qui présente plusieurs avancées en conformité avec le pilier 1 du plan RCPCA de relèvement de la paix en République centrafricaine pour la période de 2017 à 2021. Parmi ces différentes avancées, nous pouvons noter la mise en place par le gouvernement du plan national de défense, le concept d'emploi des forces et une politique nationale de la sécurité qui se nomme le PNS, le tout ayant pour but de former et d'équiper en urgence les forces de défense et de sécurité, afin d'apporter une réponse idoine aux menaces contre la sécurité sur l'ensemble du territoire national et la protection des populations. Le gouvernement, avec l'appui de la MINUSCA, continue de restaurer l'autorité de l'État à travers le déploiement et le redéploiement des forces de défense et de sécurité, ainsi qu'au niveau de l'administration dans tout l'arrière-pays. Pour atteindre les objectifs de référence, le benchmark, communiqué par le président du Conseil de sécurité en date du 9 avril 2019, des avancées significatives ont été réalisées. en dépit des contraintes financières et sanitaires que nous traversons, dans le cadre notamment également de la gestion des armes et des munitions, en conformité avec les notifications et les dérogations qui ont été accordées et qui sont contenues dans les différentes résolutions adoptées au niveau du Conseil des Nations Unies. Dans le cadre du renforcement de l'état de droit en République centrafricaine, plusieurs sessions criminelles ont été organisées par la Cour d'appel de Bangui, de Boire, ayant permis de juger ainsi les personnes ayant commis des crimes de guerre et des crimes contre l'humanité en République centrafricaine. Aussi, le ministère de la Justice poursuit sa politique de démilitarisation de la gestion du système plénipotentiaire et du recrutement des gardiens de prison afin d'humaniser les maisons carcérales en République centrafricaine. À ce jour, le taux d'accessibilité des personnes vulnérables nous pouvons noter à environ 12 millions de personnes en charge au travers des cliniques juridiques et une loi qui a été mise en place dans le cadre de la stratégie juridique. Le gouvernement s'active également dans la mise en œuvre de la loi sur la parité et bientôt, la Cour pénale spéciale démarrera ses audiences. Dans le cadre de l'organisation et la tenue des prochaines élections électorales, l'Autorité nationale des élections vient de boucler l'étape d'enrôlement et les publications des listes électorales sont en cours. Il s'ensuivra la convocation du corps électoral, l'inscription des candidats et par la suite la gestion des contentieux liés aux opérations électorales et un plan de sécurisation qui est mis en place pour pouvoir garantir justement ce processus électoral. Tout comme pour la sécurité sanitaire face au Covid, un certain nombre de mesures ont été prises. Toutefois, le code électoral a été modifié en tenant compte du délai constitutionnel, sauf que le vote des réfugiés n'a pas pu être pris en compte et nous le regrettons malgré la volonté du gouvernement, le délai imparti et les différentes contraintes liées au processus d'enrôlement de ces réfugiés ne pourra être tenu dans les délais constitutionnels. Le président de la République a mis en place également un comité chargé de suivre la gestion des ressources mobilisées pour la lutte contre le Covid-19, sous la coprésidence du ministère des Finances et du Budget et en concertation avec le ministère de la Santé. À travers un mécanisme des gouvernances spécifiques, les prévisions des institutions de Bretton Woods, le FMI ou la Banque mondiale, indiquent une hausse de 12% du revenu des ménages dans le monde, une baisse de 12% du revenu des ménages dans le monde, ce qui ne laisse pas présager une bonne partie de la population pourrait tomber justement dans d'extrême pauvreté. En ce qui concerne la République centrafricaine, en ce qui concerne l'accord de PPR, l'accord de paix qui a été signé par les 14 groupes armés et le gouvernement, plusieurs engagements qui ont été pris par le gouvernement dans le respect des dispositions contenues dans cet accord et qui font l'objet de violations par les groupes armés, constatés et parmi lesquels nous pouvons constater le réarmement de certains de ces groupes, des violations massives du droit humain international. Et dans la perspective de ces actions, certaines groupes armés maintiennent et détiennent encore le contrôle d'une certaine partie du territoire. Et nous réclamons, par rapport à ces violations, la mise en place la mise en place concrète de la disposition de l'article 35 justement de la PPR. Nous avons également, par rapport à la loi 20-009 du 7 avril 2020, porté la création de la commission Vérité, Justice, Réparation et Réconciliation. La loi 20-011 du 11 juin 2020 qui a mis en place justement la loi concernant les partis politiques et le statut de l'opposition. Nous avons également mis en place la loi concernant la pension relative aux anciens chefs de l'État. Autant d'efforts qui participent à la construction de la paix, veut souvent exprimer les centrafricaines en vue de ramener définitivement la paix en République centrafricaine et dans la sous-région. Seul gage d'un développement durable et harmonieux du peuple centrafricain. C'est également ici, pour moi, le lieu de réitérer la volonté du gouvernement centrafricain sur le renouvellement du mandat renforcé de la MINUSCA, remercier toutes les parties prenantes et notamment notre ambassadeur et cher frère pour tous les efforts qui ont été menés par la configuration de la commission de consolidation de la paix en République centrafricaine Je vous remercie pour les efforts menés en faveur de mon pays. Je vous remercie pour votre aimable attention. Merci.
I thank sincerely my dear sister, Sylvie Bai-Potaman, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Central Africans, for her declaration. And I would like to tell her that what the chair is doing is just the most beautiful duty as African, as brother, and as also interested by the PBC, because we believe in the capacity of your country to rise and to turn this page and to build better future for the African, Central African people. And we have full confidence in your president and in your government to do so, especially at the eve of the coming elections. Now I have the pleasure to give the floor to my dear brother, Mankur Gai, Special Representative of Secretary General and Head of MINUSCA. You have the floor, my dear brother. And you can speak in French if you want.
Yes, yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassadeur Hilal. Merci beaucoup, chers frères et amis, Ambassadeur Hilal, président de la configuration. M'entendez?
Oui, oui.
Président de la configuration centrafricaine de la Commission de consolidation de la paix et représentant permanent du Royaume du Maroc auprès des Nations Unies, Madame la ministre des Affaires étrangères, Monsieur le secrétaire général du gouvernement, cher ami Alexandre, secrétaire général des Nations Unies, cher ami Oscar, secrétaire général des Nations Unies, Monsieur Han, représentant résident de la Banque mondiale en République centrafricaine, Mesdames les représentantes de la société civile centrafricaine, distingués participants. Je voudrais vous dire combien je suis honoré de me retrouver encore une fois devant la configuration centrafricaine de la Commission de consolidation de la paix sur la situation en République centrafricaine. La périodicité de cette réunion témoigne de l'intérêt que la Commission de consolidation de la paix porte à la situation en République centrafricaine, au mandat de la MINUSCA et à la coordination de l'intervention des partenaires internationaux dans ce contexte préélectoral pour la consolidation de l'ordre constitutionnel et la préservation des acquis ardument engrangés sur le chemin vers une paix durable en République centrafricaine. Permettez-moi de saluer la présence de la ministre des Affaires étrangères et du secrétaire général du gouvernement à cette réunion qui témoigne de tout l'intérêt que le gouvernement de la République centrafricaine accorde aux efforts de consolidation de la paix menés par la configuration centrafricaine de la Commission de consolidation de la paix. Chers frères et amis ambassadeurs Hilal, cette réunion intervient au lendemain des consultations du Conseil de sécurité sur le rapport du secrétaire général sur la situation en République centrafricaine. Comme vous le savez, ce rapport, qui est le troisième et le dernier de l'année, alimentera les débats en cours déjà sur le renouvellement du mandat de la MINUSCA au sein du Conseil de sécurité. Conformément à la tradition établie, cette fois-ci encore, nous saurons compter sur vos recommandations au Conseil quant aux priorités en matière de consolidation de la paix afin de renforcer le prochain mandat dont l'adoption est prévue vers la mi-novembre prochain. Monsieur le Président, chers frères, distingués membres de la configuration, à quelques 2 mois du premier tour des élections présidentielles et législatives couplées du 27 décembre 2020, nous nous réjouissons de l'achèvement du processus d'enrôlement des électeurs et de la publication d'une liste électorale comptant 1 859 890 électeurs inscrits, dont 865 106 femmes, soit 46,5% du total des inscrits, ce qui est particulièrement remarquable. La RCA dispose ainsi d'un fichier électoral informatisé, puisque soumis à une procédure de traitement des données rigoureuse, faisant usage pour la première fois d'un logiciel de détection des doublons. Il s'agit là d'un pas important que vient de franchir la République centrafricaine en dépit du contexte de crise sanitaire aiguë avec la COVID-19 et des multiples obstacles sécuritaires, logistiques et financiers qui se sont dressés tout au long du processus électoral. Je dois dire que le contexte préélectoral reste marqué par des interrogations de la classe politique dues certainement à un déficit de communication autour des avancées électorales et un climat de suspicion, dû également à la controverse relative à la réforme de l'organe de gestion des élections et des défis liés à la dynamisation d'un cadre de concertation inclusif entre parties prenantes pour des élections apaisées. L'appui de la MINUSCA, en particulier et du système des Nations Unies en général, a été déterminant pour transcender les défis mentionnés et créer les conditions favorables à l'organisation d'élections pacifiques, comme le recommande le Conseil de sécurité. Nos bons offices politiques, cumulés à ceux du G5+, le G5+, qui regroupe la France, la Russie, les États-Unis, les Nations Unies, l'Union européenne, l'Union africaine, la CEAC et la Banque mondiale, ces bons offices donc ont permis de mener des consultations élargies avec l'ensemble des parties prenantes et des institutions centrafricaines pour promouvoir le dialogue et la gestion consensuelle de toutes les préoccupations relatives au processus électoral. Monsieur le Président et chers frères, la persistance des violences dans certaines localités du pays, en particulier dans le nord-ouest, a paralysé à un moment le processus d'enrôlement des électeurs et nous a contraints à mener une opération militaire contre le groupe armé 3R qui, combiné de manière concertée à l'intervention des garants et facilitateurs de l'accord de paix auprès du leader des 3R, a permis de boucler l'enrôlement des électeurs dans cette partie du pays. Dans ce contexte extrêmement sensible, la MINUSCA reste engagée à soutenir les préparatifs et la tenue des élections conformément à son mandat découlant de la résolution 2499 du 15 novembre 2019. La MINUSCA y œuvre à travers notamment les bons offices de son leadership pour la création d'un environnement politique favorable à des élections inclusives et apaisées, y compris dans le cadre de notre soutien à la mise en œuvre de l'accord politique pour la paix et la réconciliation en République centrafricaine. L'assistance technique est celle de l'équipe pays des Nations Unies en RCA, qui demeure cruciale pour soutenir l'autorité nationale des élections dans la conduite des opérations électorales et les magistrats pour la phase de gestion des contentieux relatifs aux inscriptions sur la liste électorale. L'appui logistique, avec la mobilisation de 107 vols spéciaux que la MINUSCA a mobilisés, 107 vols pour le déploiement de plus de 850 agents de l'autorité nationale des élections et 112 tonnes de matériel électoraux, ainsi que 12 tonnes supplémentaires par la voie routière sous escorte de la force de la MINUSCA. L'appui de la force de la MINUSCA et de la police des Nations Unies à la sécurisation du processus électoral dans le cadre d'un plan intégré de sécurisation des élections que j'ai eu le privilège de co-signer le 2 octobre dernier avec le Premier ministre et la présidente de l'autorité nationale des élections. La coordination de l'appui international aux élections et le plaidoyer pour la participation des femmes. Nous avons vu les résultats obtenus. La participation des jeunes, la participation des réfugiés et des personnes déplacées internes. En ce qui concerne les réfugiés, nous regrettons que le vote des réfugiés ne puisse pas être organisé et le président Touadéra en a donné toutes les explications lors de son intervention à l'événement de haut niveau du 1er octobre dernier. Aujourd'hui, Monsieur le Président et chers frères, chers participants, la République centrafricaine avance résolument vers la tenue des élections présidentielles et législatives dans les délais constitutionnels. Les listes électorales sont affichées. La convocation du corps électoral est prévue le 28 octobre prochain. Le dépôt des candidatures se fera entre le 1er et le 10 novembre. La liste provisoire des candidats à l'élection présidentielle devrait être annoncée par l'autorité nationale des élections le 11 novembre. Et la liste définitive des candidats à l'élection présidentielle sera arrêté par la Cour constitutionnelle le 3 décembre prochain et la campagne électorale se déroulera du 12 au 15 décembre 2020, le premier tour de l'élection présidentielle et des législatives le 27 décembre. En cas de second tour, ce sera le 6 février 2021. Le soutien de la configuration centrafricaine, combiné à celui des partenaires internationaux, est absolument nécessaire, Monsieur le Président et chers frères. Nous saurons compter sur vous, connaissant votre dynamisme, connaissant votre sens du dialogue et votre engagement personnel pour tout ce qui concerne la cause centrafricaine. Nous saurons compter sur vous, Monsieur le Président et chers frères, pour la promotion du dialogue entre les parties prenantes durant tout le processus électoral, pour le respect de l'ordre constitutionnel et de l'autorité de la Cour constitutionnelle, qui est le seul juge, le seul et unique juge des élections. Nous saurons compter sur vous, Monsieur le Président, chers frères, pour la préservation de l'intégrité de l'accord politique pour la paix et la réconciliation, qui reste la seule et unique voie viable et crédible vers une paix durable, comme vient de le réaffirmer hier à l'unanimité lors de l'examen du rapport du secrétaire général sur la situation en République centrafricaine par tous les membres du Conseil de sécurité. À nos yeux, ces élections ne gagnent de pertinence et d'utilité qu'à condition de contribuer à l'œuvre de consolidation de la paix qui se nourrit du renforcement de l'ordre constitutionnel, de la promotion de l'état de droit et du processus de démocratisation du système politique centrafricain. Monsieur le Président, chers frères, distingués membres de la Commission, chers participants, je tiens à souligner l'excellent partenariat entre la MINUSCA et l'équipe pays des Nations Unies, et plus particulièrement le PNUD, le HCR et ONU Femmes, et la Banque mondiale, naturellement, qui se sont résolument engagés pour contribuer à une prise en compte de la dimension genre et dont les efforts ont abouti à une forte inscription des femmes qui constituent, comme je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, 46,5% des 1 859 890 inscrits. Et nous avons enregistré à ce jour 3 candidates femmes sur les 16 candidats jusque-là déclarés pour l'élection présidentielle. La MINUSCA poursuit son plaidoyer auprès des acteurs politiques pour l'application de la loi sur la parité, notamment leur inclusion à hauteur de 35% sur les listes de candidatures aux élections législatives. En outre, le plan intégré de sécurisation des élections prévoit des dispositions spéciales pour que les femmes puissent voter en toute sécurité, surtout dans les endroits difficiles d'accès. Nous y travaillons au sein de la MINUSCA. Monsieur l'ambassadeur et chers frères, chers participants, l'apparition de la pandémie de la COVID-19 en mars 2020 en RCA a rajouté un niveau de complexité supplémentaire aux divers risques relatifs au retard du démarrage des opérations électorales et le besoin urgent de mobiliser des ressources suffisantes. La mobilisation des ressources se poursuit en parallèle avec les efforts d'ajustement du budget global des élections de 2020-2021. Sur les 41,8 millions de dollars américains requis dans le cadre du panier de fonds, le basket fund, géré par le PNUD, il manque près de 4 millions de dollars pour finaliser les préparatifs des élections présidentielles et législatives et près de 13 millions de dollars américains pour les élections locales et régionales prévues en novembre 2021 et janvier 2022. J'en appelle donc à la générosité des États membres de la Commission et à leur plaidoyer envers l'ensemble des États de la communauté internationale pour mobiliser les ressources restantes pour l'organisation des 3 scrutins dans les délais prévus par la Constitution. Les élections locales sont extrêmement importantes parce qu'elles ne sont pas organisées dans ce pays depuis 1988 et elles vont contribuer largement au processus de décentralisation dans le pays. Il faut absolument qu'un regard également soit porté sur ces élections, même si la priorité aujourd'hui, c'est la tenue des élections générales, présidentielles et législatives. Je tiens à souligner l'impact majeur du Fonds pour la consolidation de la paix, avec plus de 100 millions de dollars investis en RCA depuis 2007. Cher ami Oscar, merci beaucoup pour ton appui. Cela dénote de la haute priorité accordée à la RCA par la Commission et des États contributeurs au fonds. L'année dernière, le PBF a apporté un soutien essentiel et rapide à la mise en œuvre de l'accord politique pour la paix et la réconciliation, avec notamment plus de 20 millions de dollars investis pour appuyer plusieurs priorités de l'accord, telles que la mise en place des unités spéciales mixtes de sécurité, la vulgarisation de l'accord, la mise en place de mécanismes de suivi de l'accord, la gestion transfrontalière de la transhumance et l'appui à la justice transitionnelle. Le financement du PBF agit comme un catalyseur pour attirer plus d'investissements et a permis aussi de renforcer les partenariats stratégiques entre les agences des Nations Unies, la MINUSCA et les partenaires régionaux, l'Union africaine et la CAC notamment. Je remercie donc les États membres contributeurs au fonds. Je les encourage à poursuivre leur soutien à la mise en œuvre de l'accord de paix et le soutien aux priorités de consolidation de la paix en RCA, telles que dégagées par le gouvernement centrafricain. Je recommande aussi que le soutien déterminant de la MINUSCA au gouvernement pour l'organisation des élections présidentielles, législatives et locales soit pleinement renouvelé dans le prochain mandat de la MINUSCA. Monsieur le Président, nous comptons sur vous également pour un plaidoyer fort auprès du Conseil de sécurité pour que le mandat électoral qui a été accordé à la MINUSCA par le Conseil de sécurité puisse être également reconduit dans le prochain mandat. La MINUSCA se félicite de ses engagements et réitère son soutien aux initiatives de l'ambassadeur Ila et à la Confédération centrafricaine de la Commission de consolidation de la paix pour mobiliser les ressources nécessaires à la tenue des élections dans le respect des délais constitutionnels. Permettez-moi de clore mes propos en vous félicitant encore une fois mon frère et ami, l'ambassadeur Ila, pour vos efforts constants et votre engagement permanent à soutenir les priorités et les besoins de consolidation de la paix à long terme en République centrafricaine. Je vous remercie.
I thank deeply and sincerely the SRSG Mon Cœur d'Aille for all the information shared and also for his comprehensive intervention. And I would like to assure him of my commitments to accompanying and support the action of the MINUSCA, and also to advocate the role of MINUSCA for this election, and also for the renewal of the electoral mandates of the MINUSCA in the forthcoming elections. Now I have the pleasure to give the floor to SG for the rule of law, Mr. Alexander Zouev, to tackle the aspect related to the rule of law. Mr. Zouev, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur l'ambassadeur. Excellencies, Madame la Ministre, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, it is my pleasure to brief the Peace Building Commission on behalf of the Department of Peace Operations on the situation in the Central African Republic. I appreciate the continued dialogue between the Peace Building Commission, the Secretariat, and the Security Council to ensure peacekeeping mandates advance peace building and sustaining peace priorities. The renewal of MINUSCA mandate is being considered in a delicate and fluid context, both in the Central African Republic and globally. Existing challenges have been compounded and amplified by the COVID-19 pandemic. It has therefore proven invaluable that MINUSCA has a broad but clearly prioritized mandate, which allowed its leadership to adapt the work of the mission to a dynamic and evolving context while continuing to deliver its mandated task. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, MINUSCA's good offices and political engagement will continue to be carefully calibrated and balanced with a robust security posture in support of the political process. The political agreement must be fully implemented, as it remains the only viable path towards sustainable peace in Central African Republic and the region. The upcoming presidential and legislative elections, as it was said by many previous speakers, including Her Excellency, Madam the Minister, present a crucial opportunity to consolidate the democratic gains and constitutional order established in 2015-2016. The continuation of MINUSCA electoral assistance mandate with the support of the international community will be essential to create an environment conducive to peaceful, inclusive, fair, and transparent elections held within constitutional timelines. On inclusivity, it is deeply regrettable that refugees will not be able to participate in the electoral processes, although we take note of the challenges laid out by the government and just explained by Madam the Minister. Efforts to expand the political space must continue in light of the long-standing grievances related to exclusion and marginalization, while active participation of women in the electoral process, including as candidates, should continue to be encouraged. Excellencies, dear colleagues, MINUSCA's support to national rule of law and security institutions is instrumental in implementing the political agreement and advancing the national recovery and peace-building plan. Under the umbrella of the global focal points for the rule of law, MINUSCA, together with UNDP, supported national authorities in sustaining all efforts and basic functioning of the criminal justice system amid the COVID-19 pandemic, including through security and prison management support in the Bangui prisons. I welcome the progress made in implementing the I welcome the progress made in implementing the national justice sector policy, as well as the training and continued deployment of the new civilian prison personnel. National courts and the Special Criminal Court made strides in investigating serious crimes, including those perpetrated in violation of the political agreement. We anticipate the first trial of the Special Criminal Court to be held already in 2021. Assistance from MINUSCA, UNDP, bilateral and multilateral partners to the court will remain critical, and I thank the vital support of member states, including by nominating candidates to serve as international magistrates and helping address the 7 million funding gap for 2021. I further recognize the invaluable support of the Member State Reference Group on the Special Criminal Court and the rule of law in Central African Republic, and notably, obviously, the role of chair, our distinguished President, Ambassador of Morocco. Ladies and gentlemen, tangible justice and reconciliation remain at the core of the CAR peace process. The steps made in operationalizing the Truth, Justice, Reparation and Reconciliation Commission, including the ongoing nomination of its 11 commissioners, are encouraging. I also thank the PBF and other partners, and first of all, European Union and African Union, for supporting MINUSCA and UNDP broader transitional justice initiatives. The United Nations Police continues to build the capacity of the internal security forces through co-location, selection, recruitment, and training. At the local level, community-oriented policing in Bangui PK5 allowed for the progressive return of internal security forces. The national DDR program is advancing with more than 2,000 ex-combatants demobilized to date. On security sector reforms, the deployment of professional and accountable national defense and internal security forces in CAR provinces continue to require collective coordinated efforts, as well as financial support to sustain their presence throughout the country. Mr. Chair, Excellencies, I welcome our enhanced engagement with the Peacebuilding Commission and the peacebuilding architecture of the Secretariat as we seek to enhance delivery and impact. I am very pleased that Central African Republic is the #1 priority for the Peacebuilding Fund, which has invested more than $100 million since 2007, including approximately $32.5 million for 2019 or 2020 period. Finally, I would like to say a word of appreciation for our civilian and uniformed personnel, women and men, whose safety and security is our utmost priority. And I wish to conclude by paying tribute to the sacrifice of fallen peacekeepers. I also recognize the important work of humanitarian actors in bringing life-saving support to civilians in challenging and dangerous areas. I insist on the responsibility of the Central African authorities in that regard, including through active measures to counter and prevent misinformation, violent rhetoric, and hate speech. Thank you. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur, et tous les participants.
I thank the Assistant Secretary General Alexander Zouet for his intervention and for all the effort of his department working hand in hand with the government, UNDP, and other funds and programs under the Global Focal Point Arrangement. And now I give the floor to the World Bank Country Manager, Mr. Han Fritters. Sir Han, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, Mr. Ambassador, His Excellencies, the Special Representative of the Secretary General, dear participants, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for inviting me again to this meeting. It's the second time. It's always enriching to take part in these meetings. It also underscores, I believe, the importance of the collaboration along what we always call this security, humanitarian development nexus. We are trying here in the Central African Republic to really put in place an excellent collaboration between the UN agencies, MINUSCA, and development actors like the World Bank. And I'm really happy to report, and also a little bit proud to report that this is working extremely well in this country, and maybe we'll get to some examples of that. As last time, if you allow me, Mr. Chair, I will talk from some talking points and address the socioeconomic situation in the country first, then maybe talk a little bit about kind of the COVID impacts and the COVID response, and ending on some priorities going forward. But first of all, let me congratulate the government and the partners who are supporting the government with the progress made in implementing and towards having these elections that are so crucial for this country. I'm seeing it here on the ground on a daily basis. The work that is being done to have the elections on time in a logistically well-done manner are just enormous. It is an incredible challenge to organize elections in a country with such poor connectivity, where parts of the country are occupied by armed groups still. To have to keep all these deadlines, to have the logistical requirements all in place to have this done is quite incredible and remarkable. And we seem to be on track for peaceful and correct elections towards December 27, the date that has been foreseen. And without the support of MINUSCA, this would not have been possible. Without the support of UNDP and other partners, this would absolutely not have been possible. And so these elections are critical from a development perspective. They are absolutely critical. That's the perspective that we look at. We have had 4 years of government now, and after traumatic civil wars with whom we've been able to make progress, and peace dividends are becoming visible. So if we get through these elections, we will have another 4 years to really put the country, to help the country come on a firm path out of fragility and conflict towards longer-term stabilization and peace. That's why these elections are so important, also from a development perspective. And I want to underscore the point that the special representative made about the local elections, which will follow. from a development perspective, again, it is essential that after these elections, the local elections take place. In a country with the characteristics of the Central African Republic, it is very important that these decentralized governance mechanisms actually take root, and that the power of decision-making on local issues, local development issues, is made locally by the people to their own locally elected officials, to structures that have been made possible by the decentralization law. And that is why that was recently approved, and that is why the World Bank made it an absolute priority to help the National Assembly really to shape this law, so that after these elections, at the end of next year, the country can have these local elections, which will really lay the foundation for a completed governance structure in the country that can put the country on a path towards long-term stability and security. So let me talk a little bit about the socio-economic situation as we see this today. So the COVID crisis could not have hit at a worse possible time. The country was on a trajectory of an average growth of 4.1% since 2015. So these were very good numbers. Now with the COVID-19 crisis, of course, these numbers got a hit. But at the same time, we need to say that the most recent estimations, and we had the opportunity of an IMF mission last week or the last 2 weeks, where we had a detailed look at what the predictions are for this year. Initially, a negative growth recession was expected for this year. Now it's more expected at 0% growth. So we are already seeing that the impact of COVID-19 on the economy might be less prolonged than we had anticipated in the first place. But of course, that does not mean that these impacts are not there. And especially, and this is quite important now, especially with the people, the population of CER. As the Minister of Foreign Affairs explained well in her opening remarks, so we foresee that the number of people, maybe up to 150, 140,000 people will be pushed into extreme poverty, so that the numbers of extreme poverty in the country would reach about 71% of the population. That is a very, very high number, and we have to be absolutely careful with that and be ready to respond to that. And one of the reasons for that, of course, is that when the COVID-19 crisis struck, the prices went up, and now when the COVID-19 crisis is receding, the prices have not come down to their original level. So this difference, this is what people who live on a day-to-day basis, who need to find their food and their income on a daily basis. Obviously, it's a very hard shock to absorb. And I'll come in a moment to the kinds of responses that we are considering. Of course, additional poverty, extreme poverty leads to more food insecurity, but also other reasons in COVID-19. So there's some plagues, agriculture, the yields of manioc and others might be less than expected because of some plagues that are taking place. There's a risk of floodings, of floods that will be coming. We'll see over the next 3 weeks how this plays out, can lead to more displaced people. And so it could actually lead to a number of people getting to acute food insecurity. And that's another very, very important concern that we're seeing here. Of course, all this amidst a tense election season. Right, so it is very well possible that the floods hit in the course of November. This will not be politically the most quiet time of the year. So it is something to be really, really cautious and careful about. And I think all actors from their respective responsibilities need to be very mindful of these risks that we are running. So that's a little bit on what we're seeing on the socio-economic side. Let me talk briefly about the COVID-19 and the response that was provided. First of all, I must say that it has been an excellent opportunity to really deepen even further the collaboration between the World Bank as a development partner and a financier of these kinds of efforts, where the World Bank really did an effort to be fast in the response, fast with financing, and also the IMF did that. And I think we did a fairly good job in being we're a little slow with our responses, but this one, the World Bank was really fast in the response, but it was coupled with an on-the-ground response, deploying lots of logistical resources, but also intellectual resources by MINUSCA, very important. So this was a great partnership, a great collaboration, also with WHO and UNICEF and under the leadership of the Ministry of Health. And so there was a quiet for some time when the day-to-day fight in the midst of the urgency, when we're all locked up here, and when we were all kind of putting most of our hours of the day in the fight against COVID-19 on an hour-by-hour basis, there was this quite interesting collaboration between all these different partners under government leadership, where there was capable leadership in the Ministry of Health. That for me really was an example of how we should be working also not in times of emergency. And so I just wanted to put out there that kind of collaboration was quite exceptional. So the World Bank made available $8.5 million for the health response, and then also budget support to help with the fiscal gap, 25 million. The IMF also made available funding, all in the first few months of the response, and those have been essential to contain the disease, in addition to this excellent collaboration between the partners. We're also seeing that that the disease is receding now, just not like in many African countries, but also in the Central African Republic. We are seeing that there are very few cases right now. Also, of course, the testing is not up to par as what we're seeing with more developed countries, but we know for a fact that there are not a lot of severe cases, and there are also no deaths related to COVID-19 anymore, almost. So I think we are in a space where the health impacts have been reduced very strongly, and then we are now dealing with the socio-economic impacts, which are still considerable. Just wanted to still highlight one example of how these crises provide opportunities for very innovative response. At a certain point, the president of the Republic announced and decided that mandatory wearing of masks would have to be applied here in the country as well. And so the country was not able to compete on international markets for these masks. I mean, even in developed countries, they had a hard time identifying and finding where the masks would come from. So here a project was created, and a World Bank project was restructured for that, to actually create artisanal masks locally. Now, you'd think that in a local and in a low capacity country, these are very difficult things to do. So the decision was made that 10 million masks would be produced, 2 per Central African, and distributed against certain quality control mechanisms in a matter of 3 to 4 months' time. And this is actually what happened. And I think this has been an example of how a country that's always labeled as low capacity can muster the energy to do extraordinary things, because I think that in no other country that amount of artisanal masks have been created with a quality control mechanism, using an entire locally indigenous value chain, as we have done here as a government, or the country has done in the Central African Republic. And of course, this was the response to the socio-economic, this was cornerstone of the health response. Wearing masks would actually help prevent the spreading of the disease. And as that became less and less important, we also see that the people are less and less wearing these masks. But at the same time, this was also the cornerstone of the socio-economic response, because the way the masks were produced was by having contracts with 360 small micro enterprises that are usually working in informality, that were given opportunity to participate in this project, and were injecting lots and lots of jobs, temporary jobs, in very conflicted areas such as the PK5 area. About $10 million was invested there as immediate response to temporary employment. And of course, it was also a private sector development project, if you want, with the experience of building up this value chain. I just wanted to put that out there to give a sense of the kinds of innovative things that can take place in a crisis like this. Let me talk a little bit before I just go to the forward-looking dimensions about the monitoring mechanism of the COVID-19 expenses that also the Minister of Foreign Affairs highlighted. A very interesting and a very important initiative where the country, and it was also singled out by Kristalina Georgieva in her speech at the annual meetings, is taking the initiative of really putting in place a transparent mechanism to really look at where all the COVID-19 resources came from to fight the disease, those managed by the government, but also those managed by the partners, and in a very transparent way show how they have been used in the fight for COVID-19. So this is an effort that is quite commendable, and we are supporting the government to push this forward, because it can create a culture of transparency and accountability in the country. It might have a little more absent in the past, also with partners. Finally, I think on the COVID-19 response, I think the next step is really social protection, protecting those who are most vulnerable through cash transfers. The World Bank will approve a $16 million project by the end of November to really provide cash transfers to those who have been touched most. Let me quickly touch on what we see as the priorities going forward. The World Bank. Okay, let me quickly touch on what we see as the priorities going forward. So on September 1, the World Bank approved a new country partnership strategy, a new framework for the 5 years to come, with a funding envelope under IDA 19 for the next 3 years. And so there we outline, in terms of what we see as the longer term development priorities for the country. One very innovative feature of our new envelope for IDA 19, which is until now and the mid of 2022, is that the availability of resources for development will be linked to the progress that the country makes in these political processes. So celebration, or the having of local elections, first presidential elections and local elections, if those happen in a climate of normalcy and in a peaceful way, more IDA resources from the World Bank will become available. If the country implements the peace accord, more resources will be available. This is something we've agreed upon with the government. So this government and also the next government, so they know that the availability of money that through the World Bank can be invested in the country is linked to the progress and their commitment to implement these processes, like the implementation of the peace accord. That's an innovative framework under IDA 19, on the fragile and conflict envelopes that are there. It's called the turnaround allocation, and it has also then augmented the allocation that usually would be available for the Central African Republic by 120%. And now the total envelope available over 3 years is 355 million from the World Bank. So then the question is, what do these resources need to go to? What's our view of what the key development priorities are? And I will do that. These resources, in the first place, we believe that investments need to be made in helping the country to get to long-term stability and peace. It's investing in the human capital, and the support to the peace process, but also the basic service delivery around health, education, energy, and water across the country. Secondly, it's quite important to help the country improve its management of its public resources, but also, and its governance, but also start to develop a private sector. This is quite important, so the government can have more resources that it mobilizes locally and can create jobs. Some cross-cutting issues are gender. The suffering of women is unspeakable here, and so women need to be protected, supported as engines of development. And finally, we also believe that we need to invest in digital development to leapfrog some of the problems. I stop there and always happy to answer questions. Thank you so much.
I thank Mr. Han Frittes for his briefing. And now I give the floor to Ms. Ikomo Lina, head of the Women Leadership Network. Ms. Ikomo, I would like to warmly welcome you among us today. And you have the floor, Ms.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will speak in French.
Please do.
Thank you. Excellence, Monsieur le Président de la Configuration centrafricaine de la Commission de consolidation de la paix, Excellence, Madame la Ministre des Affaires étrangères, Monsieur le Ministre chargé du Secrétariat général du gouvernement, Monsieur le représentant spécial du Secrétaire général des Nations Unies, Monsieur le représentant de la Banque mondiale, distingués représentants de la Commission de consolidation de la paix, Mesdames et Messieurs, C'est un honneur pour moi de faire entendre la voix de la société civile devant cette auguste assemblée et je vous remercie pour cette opportunité. Comme vous le savez, la République centrafricaine a connu depuis plus de 2 décennies des conflits politico-militaires et civils récurrents qui ont complètement réduit le pouvoir économique de l'État et des populations. C'est donc avec des ressources financières très limitées que les organisations de la société civile se sont engagées pour répondre aux défis posés par ces conflits, notamment en matière de consolidation de la paix, de lutte contre les violations des droits humains et d'accès des victimes à la justice, et aussi bien comme acteurs dans le processus électoral. Les femmes et les jeunes sont les groupes de population les plus marginalisés en République centrafricaine, aussi bien dans les politiques que dans les stratégies liées aux organisations internationales. Mais on se rend compte que lorsque les femmes et les jeunes s'engagent dans les questions de paix et de relèvement, leurs actions sont efficaces. La société civile a pu bénéficier du Fonds pour la consolidation de la paix, PBF, à partir de 2018, et ceci suite à la visite du secrétaire général de l'ONU en Centrafrique. Ces fonds ont donc permis d'affirmer et de renforcer la participation des femmes et des jeunes dans les processus nationaux. En matière de paix, le PBF a permis d'améliorer la structuration des organisations féminines engagées dans la consolidation de la paix par la mise en place d'une coordination nationale des femmes leaders pour la paix, de soutenir la sensibilisation et les plaidoyers qui ont abouti à la participation des femmes dans les mécanismes de mise en œuvre de l'accord de paix à hauteur de 20%. Une dynamique a été lancée en ce qui concerne les contributions des femmes au niveau de la réforme du secteur de sécurité. Il est maintenant question de promouvoir la communication dans l'optique de l'alerte précoce et de recréer les liens de confiance entre les autorités, la population et les forces de sécurité. Pour les jeunes, l'ONG Accor a développé un programme et une analyse sur la perception des jeunes par rapport à leur contribution à la mise en œuvre de l'accord de paix. Et le rapport a permis de mieux focaliser les actions sur la vision de cette jeunesse. De plus, l'appui du PBF au Conseil national de la jeunesse et l'organisation Lead de la jeunesse Ourou par le biais de Accor a permis de créer un environnement permettant aux autorités et à la population de calmer leurs craintes, leurs doutes et leurs préjugés vis-à-vis de la jeunesse. L'objectif est de visiter les lieux tenus par ces projets afin de remonter les informations sur comment mettre en place un programme qui puisse répondre aux besoins réels de cette jeunesse. En ce qui concerne le processus électoral, le PBF a permis de réveiller les consciences des femmes sur leur rôle de citoyennes ayant le droit de participer à la vie politique et publique de leur pays et surtout d'organiser des dialogues interactifs entre les leaders des partis politiques et les femmes leaders de la société. Comme résultat, un nombre important de femmes se sont déclarées candidates aux prochaines élections présidentielles et législatives. La campagne de sensibilisation dénommée Femmes Arbres de paix et pionnières de la gouvernance locale a été lancée au sein des communautés grâce au déploiement des volontaires préalablement formés. Cela a abouti à l'enrôlement de 46,6% de femmes sur la liste électorale. Les candidates aux élections bénéficient de l'encadrement des coachs et des formations sur l'engagement politique. En matière d'accès à la justice, le nombre de victimes ne cesse de s'accroître dans l'arrière-pays. Dans l'arrière-pays, notamment dans les zones où il y a encore les poches de résistance des groupes armés. Ces violences concernent également les viols et les violences sexuelles et les violences basées sur le genre. Les populations ont des difficultés pour avoir accès à l'information et à la justice. C'est ainsi que le PNUD, la MINUSCA et ONU Femmes ont lancé une initiative conjointe pour renforcer l'accès à la justice à travers le projet Appui aux victimes et à la population et de faciliter l'accès à cette justice. Le projet a permis de mettre en place 9 cliniques juridiques à Bangui et dans les provinces afin d'aider la population à avoir accès à la justice. Des avocats fournissent les services gratuitement à la population. Des actions de mobilisation populaire, des causeries éducatives et des émissions radio sont régulièrement organisées pour sensibiliser la population contre les violences, sur les droits humains et l'accès à la justice. Un service psychosocial est mis en place pour une écoute active des victimes, les orienter et aider à élaborer un plan d'action pour les justiciables et les victimes qui veulent défendre leurs droits ou intenter une action en justice. Monsieur le Président, le Fonds pour la consolidation de la paix est un outil important qui a permis d'affirmer la participation des femmes et des jeunes, deux groupes numériquement majoritaires de la population. Cette mobilisation constitue un socle important pour rendre effective la collaboration formelle et programmatique entre les Nations unies et la société civile en République centrafricaine. La société civile centrafricaine a besoin de plus de financement du PBF pour consolider les acquis des interventions précédentes et pour soutenir sa participation comme partenaire efficace de premier choix dans la mise en œuvre de l'accord de paix, notamment pour transformer les dividendes du dialogue intergénérationnel autour des résolutions 1325 et 2250 en actions conjointes concrètes, femmes et jeunes sur le terrain, et surtout pour rendre effective la participation des femmes et des jeunes dans la médiation. Dans le processus électoral, afin de poursuivre la promotion des candidatures féminines et de s'engager dans la sensibilisation pour des élections apaisées. Dans la réforme du secteur de sécurité, la restauration de l'autorité de l'État et la mise en œuvre du DDR afin de rétablir la confiance entre la population, les forces de défense et de sécurité et les autorités nationales et locales. Dans la protection de la société civile et la promotion des droits humains. Jusqu'à présent, les organisations de la société civile engagées dans la promotion des droits humains n'ont pas reçu des soutiens conséquents pour renforcer leurs actions. Elles doivent faire partie des bénéficiaires du PBF en vue d'accompagner et soutenir les actions de la mission onusienne pour un meilleur impact au sein des communautés. Dans le renforcement de la résilience des femmes face aux défis sécuritaires et à la pandémie de la COVID-19. Un appui du PBF pourrait les aider à diversifier leurs activités génératrices de revenus afin de soulager les familles démunies dans les zones affectées par les conflits armés où les femmes vivent dans une pauvreté extrême. Distinguées personnalités, la société civile centrafricaine, plus spécifiquement en ce qui concerne le renouvellement du mandat de la mission onusienne, souhaiterait porter à votre haute attention ce qui suit. Les femmes représentent plus de 50% de la population. Les jeunes représentent 70% de cette population. Cela veut dire que les jeunes filles aussi représentent une part importante dans cette population centrafricaine. Elles doivent être prises en compte dans le mandat de la MINUSCA de manière spécifique et à travers un programme impliquant les femmes et les jeunes. Les dialogues intergénérationnels ont révélé les profonds traumatismes et la marginalisation de ces jeunes filles dans les initiatives nationales et celles appuyées par les partenaires internationaux. Le mécanisme de prise en compte de la voix de la société civile doit être redynamisé en repensant son implication dans les shadow reports pour contribuer au rapport du représentant spécial. Ce mécanisme devra permettre aussi de donner plus de voix à la société civile, de compiler sa voix, ses analyses et ses perceptions en incluant la voix des jeunes et des femmes. Derrière les interventions de la MINUSCA, dont les dividendes sont attendus au niveau de la population, on compte la présence de la société civile qui joue son rôle et qui attend le retour du Conseil de sécurité pour créer une dynamique plus importante. C'est pourquoi la voix de la société civile qui représente la population devra se faire entendre dans les briefings et en dehors de la salle pour soutenir la dynamique des femmes et des jeunes à travers une interaction avec les acteurs qui veulent aider la RCA. La perception globale sur la société civile centrafricaine est que le système est faible. Partant du principe qu'il y a effectivement des difficultés, les conditions d'accès aux fonds doivent être allégées pour faire vivre les organisations de la société civile. Enfin, le cas de la RCA est complexe et spécifique. Prenant en compte cela, il est important de repenser la manière dont les fonds sont distribués. Au niveau du siège, il va falloir créer un espace pour repenser la stratégie en donnant l'occasion de dialoguer avec la société civile sur et réalités de terrain. Il y a déjà de l'impact visible, mais on peut encore faire plus pour renforcer et rendre plus durables les dividendes. Je terminerai mes propos en renouvelant la gratitude de la société civile à votre Excellence, Monsieur le Président, à tous les membres de la Commission pour la paix, au représentant spécial du secrétaire général des Nations Unies et aux représentants de la Banque mondiale pour votre appui constant à la République centrafricaine. Je vous remercie.
Je remercie ma sœur Ilko Molina pour sa intervention et pour sa plaidoirie. Je voudrais lui dire que je suis très heureux de la revoir parce que je me rappelle encore de notre réunion il y a quelques mois. De ça, je voudrais vous féliciter pour votre engagement et pour votre résilience à mobiliser les femmes et les jeunes.
Merci beaucoup.
Je voudrais vous dire également que votre message a été bien entendu et bien noté. But now I have the pleasure to open the floor for the delegations who would like to take the floor or comments or share questions. I have here a long list: European Union, Egypt, France, Germany, Japan, Norway, and after I have another list for the followers. So first of all, I have the pleasure to give the floor to my good friend, Ambassador of and PR of European Union. You have the floor. Olof.
Thank you very much, Omar. Thank you for chairing us today, and thank you for the very, very impressive lineup of briefers. Greetings to the Foreign Minister and to all other very, very relevant actors that you have lined up for us today. I will focus on the elections and the political agreement. I'll try to be brief, but I really wanted to echo what Madam Lina just said about the need for full and meaningful participation of civil society, particularly women and youth, in all, both the political and reconciliation efforts, and certainly in the elections, etc. This is fundamental to building peace in Central African Republic. Mr. President, we believe that the upcoming elections do provide a unique opportunity to firmly entrench democracy in the Central African Republic. So I wanted to pay tribute in the presence of the government, also, on all the efforts that the authorities have done to strengthen the state, democracy and stability in the country. We have seen, however, increased political tensions over the last months. And so only a transparent, credible, peaceful, inclusive electoral process which favors dialogue and consensus and respects the constitutional order, ensuring acceptable quality standards, can guarantee the credible elections. So I really wanted to stress that point, and I know it's well established among the briefers today. We are proud, the European Union, to provide more than half of the budget for the preparations of the elections coming up. And we're also providing expertise to strengthen the capacity of the institutions in the country. But we call on all stakeholders, majority, opposition, and civil society to act responsibly. as well as on the authorities to double their efforts to ensure that the process is credible and constructive. And that responsibility falls particularly, of course, with the state, who controls most of this. They should also take the necessary measures to strengthen inclusiveness of the process and ideally find proper solutions to allow refugees to vote. The next steps will be even more crucial following the recent modification of the electoral law. And I want to say that we stand ready to help also in this respect. When it comes to peace and security more broadly, we pay tribute to the courage of the authorities and President Touadéra, in particular with the signature last year of the Agreement on Peace and Reconciliation. We have since then witnessed progress, and we believe that the implementation of the agreement should remain a priority. But we've also seen violations perpetrated by some armed groups, and that the process now has come to a bit of a stalemate. So dialogue among parties, re-engagement of both sides, government and armed groups, revitalization of the agreement, and in particular relaunching and if necessary reviewing the follow-up mechanisms seems to us more needed than ever. The agreement needs new impetus, but without compromising on the core of the agreement. No impunity for those violating the agreement. In this regard, we call on the guarantors as well as the facilitators and the broader region to increase engagement in support to an effective implementation of the agreement. The neighboring countries do have a very important role to play in this. Mr. President, on disinformation, we are concerned by the continuation of disinformation campaigns in the country. We have been the victim of that, but the broader concern here is that some of this aims at weakening the support of the population against democracy and stability. So that needs to be, we need to be aware of this and try and jointly try to counter this as much as we can. Finally, on EU support, I'm proud to say that we have been and we will continue to be one of the strongest supporters of the country's authorities and population. We are mobilizing all our instruments, political, humanitarian, cooperation, security, crisis management, including through a new civilian mission to accompany the Central African Republic on a difficult path. We understand that this needs to be reforms towards a stronger governance and rule of law, fight against corruption and impunity, strengthen state authority and capacity, increased economic opportunities for all. And the civil society participation in that are key. In all these efforts, we are more than ever committed to closely cooperating with the United Nations, of course, as well as with the African Union and ECAS and other partners involved, not least the neighbors of the Central African Republic. Needless to say, we support MINUSCA's mandate, including the recommendations by the Secretary General on that issue. Thank you very much again, Omar.
I thank very much the PR of EU and my good friend Olof Scott. Now I have the pleasure to give the floor to the PR of Egypt, Mohammed Idris, my dear brother.
Thank you very much, my dear brother Omar, and allow me to start by commending your leadership of this important configuration of CAR and to extend my thanks also to the chairmanship of the PBC, the PBSO, and of course to distinguished briefers, the Honorable Minister, distinguished RSG, and all representatives of the CAR officials and representatives from CAR and from the United Nations. Dear brother, let me emphasize that Egypt remains supportive to the 2019 peace agreement, and it respects that the unity, and it respects the unity and territorial integrity of CAR, and brings all the components of the nation together. We encourage its inclusive implementation and urge the international community to support Bangui in this regard. During the ministerial meeting on CAR on the 1st of October, recently, Egypt was clear on the need for peace continuum in CAR and growing from peacekeeping to peace building. The country is in need indeed for strong state institutions in order to sustain peace. I can't agree more on the importance of the upcoming elections. There is a necessity to intensify the work of the PBC to support the elections and to make use of PBF towards this endeavor. Thus, we call upon the international community and donors to support the elections. And we are encouraged by the really message of support which we are hearing. From our side, beside our large contribution in MINUSCA, Egypt continues its capacity building programs in CAR, especially in the domains of security, peaceful coexistence, judicial reform, and for post-conflict reconstruction and development, which is critical for CAR. We work within the EU to ensure the rapid operationalization of the EU Center for PCRD and to give focus on CAR. We acknowledge the pivotal role of the neighboring countries, leaders of ECAS and the EU. The peace process in CAR remains an example of African solutions for African problems. On sanctions, we believe that the dialogue is required with Bangui in order to avoid enforcing sanctions that create an obstacle hindering the implementation of the peace agreement. In conclusion, let me conclude by raising the PBC advisory opinion to the Security Council. My delegation took note of the good proposal submitted by the chair and we support it completely. And we think that the draft could be further enriched by stressing on synergy and complementarity between the PBC and Security Council. Also, the complementarity between the UN and EU peacebuilding related mechanisms. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
I thank my dear brother Ambassador Mohamed Idris from Egypt, and now I give the floor to the DPR of France.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, and I would like to apologize because Nathalie, our DPR, was not able to make it at this moment. And I speak in French, and English version of the speaking points are distributed in English.
Okay.
Cette configuration de la PBC est très dynamique et très importante et on le doit au Maroc. Donc, je voudrais au nom de la France vous saluer, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur. Je veux aussi remercier les briefers pour leurs interventions très utiles et saluer la participation de la ministre des Affaires étrangères et des ONG centrafricaines. Vos contributions sont très importantes pour nous tous aux Nations Unies. Je concentrerai mon propos sur la mobilisation des soutiens internationaux à la République centrafricaine à un moment charnière de la vie démocratique de ce pays et l'appui à la MINUSCA. Sur la situation politique et sécuritaire, je renvoie aux déclarations de la France hier au Conseil de sécurité. Nous l'avons entendu ce matin, les défis et les besoins sont colossaux en République centrafricaine. Qu'il s'agisse du processus électoral, de l'assistance humanitaire, du rétablissement de l'autorité de l'État, de l'appui à la justice, notamment à travers la Cour pénale spéciale, de l'égalité entre les femmes et les hommes, de l'inclusion des jeunes et des questions de réconciliation. Nous saluons l'engagement des autorités centrafricaines et nous nous félicitons de la mobilisation des organisations régionales, notamment de l'Union africaine, de la Communauté économique des États d'Afrique centrale et de l'Union européenne, en particulier en ce qui concerne l'appui au processus électoral. La France prend toute sa part à ces efforts sur le volet électoral, mais aussi en matière d'éducation et de formation professionnelle. En 3 ans, nous avons engagé 200 millions d'euros sur des projets de développement au bénéfice de tous les Centrafricains. Nous avons opéré un pont aérien qui a permis d'acheminer 48 tonnes d'aide humanitaire au moment où toutes les voies de communication étaient coupées en raison de la Covid-19 et nous allons continuer. Nous appelons tous les bailleurs à se mobiliser pour que les élections de décembre et que les élections locales puissent se dérouler. Pour la première fois depuis 30 ans, le RSSG l'a expliqué tout à l'heure, il y a des besoins immédiats, mais il faut regarder le processus électoral sur le long terme et nous relayons l'appel du RSSG sur ce sujet. Mon deuxième point, et je vais être rapide, c'est l'appui à la MINUSCA. Nous remercions la présidence marocaine d'avoir proposé ces réflexions sur les recommandations à adresser au Conseil de sécurité avant le renouvellement du mandat de la MINUSCA. Nous nous félicitons du large soutien des membres du Conseil de sécurité au renouvellement du mandat pour 1 an. La France, comme vous savez, tient la plume au Conseil de sécurité pour cette résolution. Notre intention est de proposer un renouvellement technique du mandat avec le maintien d'une priorité première qui est la protection des civils. Nous sommes bien évidemment à l'écoute des propositions de la PBC, en particulier dans 3 domaines. Les élections et leur inclusivité. Nous notons l'importance de l'inclusion des femmes comme électrices et comme candidates, comme Lina Ekomo l'a mentionné tout à l'heure. Deuxième point, le soutien à la mise en œuvre de l'accord du 6 février 2019. Et troisième point sur lequel nous serons très attentifs aussi aux recommandations de la PBC, c'est la dimension humanitaire, alors que le nombre d'attaques contre les personnels humanitaires s'est accru de façon intolérable, et cela a été rappelé aujourd'hui et hier. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Je vous remercie pour votre intervention. Je remercie la France. Et maintenant, je donne la parole au DPR Germany. DPR for Germany.
Thank you so much. I too would like to thank you, Mr. Chair, for pulling off this important meeting. Also, let me extend our thanks to Zevi Baipo Teman as Foreign Minister. We find this is the value of this format, that we are not speaking about countries, but we are speaking with representatives of countries. And therefore, it is also vitally important that we have representatives of the civil society with us in today's discussion. I would like to make 4 short remarks, echoing those of Olaf and Shiraz before me. My first point is on the presidential elections. We too believe that free, fair, inclusive and credible elections will be of the essence. In particular, we find it important that women, that refugees, and that internal displaced persons will be able to participate in these elections. My second point is on the judiciary. We believe that both the police and the judicial sector need to be reinforced. This will be essential to make the peace process successful. For us, this also implies that human rights violations which have taken place be followed up. We must continue to fight impunity and to make sure that those who have perpetrated crimes be brought to justice. We believe that a special criminal court can play an essential role in this endeavor. Thirdly, we see with concern that the economic growth rate in the country has recently been negative. Given this, we find it important that we join forces to make sure that the economic and the humanitarian situation in the country improve. This too will be essential to make the peace process a success. Shiraz has pointed this out before me. In such a context, we cannot accept attacks against humanitarian workers. This must be opposed in the strongest possible terms. Now, regarding MINUSCA and the upcoming renewal of the mandate, I would like to point out, and this is my last point, that of course we continue to strongly support SRSG Manka-Nidaye and the mission and the entire UN country team. Regarding the mandate renewal, we too find that everything that is essential is in place. The mission disposes of a strong and powerful and comprehensive mandate. So our focus now should not be on making significant amendments to the mandate, but on implementing what is already in the mandate. Thank you very much.
I thank the DPR of Germany, and now I have the pleasure to give the floor to the Ambassador of Japan. You have floor, my good friend.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. I thank the Chair for convening this meeting and all the briefers for their valuable inputs. To begin with, I would like to commend the continued efforts of the government of Central African Republic to bring stability to the country. Japan hopes that these efforts will advance with the support of countries and partners, particularly in implementing the February 2019 peace agreement between the government and the armed groups. At the bilateral meeting with President Touadéra on the margins of TICAD 7 in Yokohama, Japan last year, then Prime Minister Abe expressed Japan's commitment to support the state-building efforts of the Central African Republic under the banner of the New Approach for Peace and Stability in Africa, or NAPSA. The main aim of NAPSA is to ensure human security and support institution building in coordination with the state and local authorities. We believe that successful implementation of the peace agreement hinges on investment in local reconciliation and capacity building. Extension of state authorities to regions and communities is only possible by building and integrating local capacity. And it requires reconciliation, confidence building, and cooperation among state authorities, armed groups, and other local stakeholders. The immediate test for the current efforts is the presidential and legislative elections scheduled for December this year. Successful conduct of free, fair, inclusive, transparent, and credible elections stipulated in the peace agreement will promote confidence in the state among the population and reassure international and regional partners who are waiting to provide further assistance and investment. To this end, Japan has provided approximately $2.29 million to UNDP to provide equipment for election management. The spread of COVID-19 has exacerbated a multifaceted human security crisis and has cast a heavy shadow over the political process in the Central African Republic. To address the situation, Japan has provided technical and material support to the country through UNICEF to prevent the spread of the pandemic, particularly with the aim of protecting vulnerable populations such as women, youth, and internally displaced persons. Here, I would like to emphasize the need for our continued efforts beyond the elections and the COVID-19 pandemic. The country will have to consolidate and promote inclusive democracy after the announcement of the election results, and will have to strive for socio-economic recovery while continuing to contain the pandemic. This requires more joint efforts between the government of the Central African Republic and all its partners across peace, humanitarian, and development pillars. In this regard, the PBC should continue to play its central role as a platform to garner and integrate support for the country. As regards the mandate renewal, I just wanted to thank the efforts of the mission Morocco because it integrates the efforts of the PBC and the Security Council. Let me conclude by reiterating Japan's commitment to continued support for the Central African Republic. I thank you.
I thank the Ambassador of Japan, and now I give the floor to the DPR of Norway.
Thank you, Ambassador. Highly appreciated, and thank you for convening us. And also thanks to the presenters for their very illuminating presentations. Norway welcomes this opportunity to receive a briefing on the situation in the Central African Republic, and today's discussion is indeed a timely one, just a few months ahead of the upcoming elections. But as was also mentioned by several in the Security Council yesterday, we need to keep both a short-term and a long-term perspective on the situation in the country. Short term, with a view to the upcoming elections, and long term, with a focus on the implementation of last year's peace agreement. First, let me say a few words on the short-term horizon and the elections. Norway calls for peaceful, credible, transparent, and inclusive elections within the constitutional timelines. We are concerned over the reports of disinformation campaigns and potential political instability in the run-up to the elections in late December, as several presenters before me referred to. We call on all candidates to promote peace and reconciliation before, during, and after the elections. Inclusive and meaningful participation is the key to credible elections. Norway is pleased to note that the United Nations have been engaging with Central African authorities and partners, including neighboring countries, to try to promote the participation of refugees in the electoral process, while supporting the voluntary, safe, dignified, and sustainable return and reintegration. We agree with the assessment made by the Secretary General that this should be, or would be, crucial to advance peace and reconciliation and address structural violence in the country. Now, Chair, if you allow me, please let me turn to the long-term perspectives. As also Ms. Lena Ekomo was referring to, we are encouraged by the efforts to enhance the effective participation of women in the political process, including in the elections. We've taken note of the establishment of several women's situation rooms across the country to strengthen women's role in monitoring the elections and prevent election-related violence. The role of MINUSCA in supporting the efforts of advancing peace and stability in the Central African Republic remains vital. Norway is therefore supportive of the mandate renewal for the mission, extending it for 1 year. It is crucial that the key elements of this peacekeeping mission's mandate are continued. I want in particular to highlight the protection of civilians, including furthering the women's peace and security agenda, as well as the role of MINUSCA has in assisting the authorities with the elections. As a recent study on the effectiveness of MINUSCA has shown, the mission has succeeded in actively bringing the civilian death rate down and prevented the conflicts from escalating. The Secretary General's report shows that there has been both an increase in violations of the peace agreement over the last 4 months and a resurgence in violence in the Northwest. It is essential that the international community continues to support peace-building efforts in Central African Republic, also to prevent erosion of the gains made in the period preceding the COVID-19 pandemic. Unfortunately, we've seen that efforts to promote peace and stability in the region have been negatively affected by the COVID-19 pandemic and the measures introduced to limit the spread of the virus. It is crucial that humanitarian access is upheld. The CAR remains a dangerous place, not only for the civilian population, but also for humanitarian workers. It is critical to continue the efforts to promote peace and security. Finally, Mr. Chair, Norway has supported peace-building efforts in the region through the UN in general, through the PBF, and in particular through the UN multi-partner trust fund in CAR. Norway has taken the initiative to establish a UN multi-partner trust fund for crisis and recovery for the COVID-19 pandemic to address the socio-economic aspects of the crisis. We believe support through this fund, as well as the efforts of the broader multilateral system, are important complementary efforts to provide an enabling environment for peace building. Both as member of the Peace Building Commission and as an incoming member of the Security Council, Norway stands ready to support the Central African Republic, both in the short-term and the long-term perspectives. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the DPR of Norway, and now I give the floor to the DPR of Peru.
Thank you, Chair. Peru welcomes the celebration of this timely meeting and thanks the distinguished briefers for their substantive presentations. My country grants a special attention to MINUSCA as it represents our largest deployment. We are contributing with more than 200 individuals among contingent troops, experts, and staff personnel, including female peacekeepers from the 3 branches of the Peruvian Armed Forces. We consider that providing written advice to the Security Council ahead of the MINUSCA's mandate renewal is a valuable practice by this configuration that shall always be encouraged. Therefore, I would like to make some brief comments on the draft circulated by the President. First, we highlight the synergies between the political agreement for peace and reconciliation and the National Recovery and Peacebuilding Plan 2017-2021, as progress in peace building and development are closely interrelated. Indeed, MINUSCA is in position to contribute to development as the installation of a metal bridge in Bocaranga by a Peruvian engineering company that substantially improved the quality of life of the local population has clearly shown. Secondly, we strongly agree with the view that holding free, transparent, and inclusive elections is a fundamental requisite for consolidating peace and paving the way for sustainable development. Accordingly, we deem it essential not only to maintain, but also to reinforce MINUSCA's mandate for supporting the upcoming presidential, legislative, and local elections. Thirdly, regarding the humanitarian needs, we consider that special attention should be given to the human mobility issues, as the safe return of internally displaced persons and refugees is key not only for social cohesion, but for enhancing the legitimacy of the elections. Finally, combating impunity and advancing transitional justice is a crucial step for restoring state authority and consolidating people's faith in the political process. Therefore, we find critical to provide continuous support to the establishment of the Truth, Justice, Reparation, and Reconciliation Commission, as well as to the Trust Fund for Reparations. I conclude by renewing Peru's commitment to contribute to the peace process in the Central African Republic through its participation both in the PBC and the MINUSCA. I thank the Chair.
Sweden, you have the floor. Hello? If Sweden is not ready, I now give the floor to the PR of Slovakia.
Yes, thanks very much, Mr. Chair, dear Omar. Thank you very much for this excellent opportunity for us to address the various aspects of the situation in the Central African Republic in the context of the upcoming renewal of MINUSCA and the important contribution that we as PBC can make before the Security Council approves the renewal of the mandate. We fully support your efforts in that context, and we appreciate your leadership. Another thing that I would like to especially highlight and appreciate is what we have seen through the briefings today, and that is national ownership. That is really a strong confirmation of national ownership in the various contexts of the issues that we have discussed, electoral process, justice area, as well as socioeconomic developments. I think this is something that cannot be overemphasized, and that is an important principle, but also, as we see, this is something that is also happening in practice. Thank you to all the briefers led by Madam Minister and the SRSG and representatives of other important components of our assistance to the Central African Republic. It's been extremely helpful and informative. Let me start by saying that holding timely, credible, inclusive, and peaceful elections is indeed key to success of the peace process in the country. We can expect increased potential tensions as we get closer to the dates, and we certainly hope that all political actors will continue acting responsibly. We note the progress in implementing of all the different follow-up mechanisms that have been established in line with the government's commitments under the political agreement. We remain convinced that the agreement represents a chance to further improve the situation in the country if it is responsibly implemented by all parties. I would like to emphasize, like several briefers have highlighted, the issue of security sector reform as a crucial component of the developments. I would like to emphasize that SSR is above all a political process in the country, and therefore we need to stress also the importance of handling it from that particular perspective in all our efforts, including the UN role in advocating with the government and bilateral partners for greater coherence between the security sector reform efforts and the peace process. I would like to underscore and reassure you of our long-standing commitment as Slovakia, as one of the co-chairs of the group of friends of security sector reform, together with our colleagues from South Africa, that the group of friends can continue and will continue remaining a platform of our engagement with the country in this important area. We are concerned by some intercommunal tensions, some armed group clashes and attacks against civilians and humanitarian workers that continue to impact the humanitarian situation. It is therefore important to keep our focus on socioeconomic development and structural reforms, especially, as I have mentioned, in the security and governance sector, which we believe is the best remedy in the long term to also address also some of those tensions. I would like to highlight the importance of MINUSCA's work in coordinating the provision of security assistance and cooperation, advice, technical assistance, and training by international partners, in particular with EUTM and EUAM, RCA, and other bilateral partners that are working together with the government of the CAR in this important area. Also, the partnership with the African Union, the European Union, and the World Bank, all of these are really there to further foster strategic coherence of our efforts. And in conclusion, I would like to encourage MINUSCA to step up its efforts to advise and support the CAR authorities in coordination and mobilization of international security sector reform assistance to strengthen the alignment with national priorities anchored in national peace building and development strategic frameworks in order to enhance predictability and sustainability of SSR financing. Mr. Chair, dear Omar, merci beaucoup.
C'est moi qui vous remercie, mon cher ami, chef Slovakia. And now I give the floor to the Ambassador of Congo, my dear brother Raymond. You have the floor. Raymond, Congo. Do you hear me? If Congo is not ready, shall we go to Brazil? DPR of Brazil, and which will be followed by DPR of Sweden.
Thank you, Mr. President, for organizing this important meeting on the situation in the Central African Republic, as well as all the briefers for their considerations on the general situation of the country. I also commend the Moroccan presidency for the drafting of the Peace Building Commission's advice to the Security Council in the context of the upcoming renewal of the mandate of MINUSCA by November the 15th. We particularly welcome the recommendation that MINUSCA seeks to enhance its contacts with women leaders in local communities. We appreciate all PBC members' constructive engagement in drafting this language, which also reflects recommendations made by the Brazilian commander Márcia Braga in a briefing to the PBC last year. It's a point of pride for Brazil that this year again, a Brazilian commander has been bestowed with the UN's Best Military Gender Advocate Award of 2020 for her work in the Central African Republic. I'm confident Commander Carla Monteiro would be happy to join us and share some of her field experience working with women in CRA. Allow me to reaffirm the availability of the Brazilian mission to contact Commander Monteiro and organize a briefing if the PBC sees it fit. This is already the third time that the Central African Republic configuration adopts a written piece of advice to feed into the negotiations on the renewal of MINUSCA's mandate. As always, Brazil warmly welcomes and fully supports this initiative, which represents a practical translation of the Peace Building Commission's advisory mandate. We encourage this commission to build upon this good practice and provide advice to the Security Council on topics associated with peace building during the renewal of mandates of every peacekeeping mission and special political mission. We also encourage the Security Council to actively seek the Commission's advice more often, especially before adopting decisions on cross-cutting thematic issues, such as women, peace and security, and youth, peace and security. Thematic subsidiary bodies of the Council should also be encouraged to organize joint meetings with the Peace Building Commission, with the aim of allowing for a broader participation. By strengthening the Peace Building Commission advisory capacities to the Security Council, we are contributing to mitigate the serious democratic gap hole in our collective security mechanism, as well as to rendering our organization more effective and fit for purpose. Thank you.
I thank you very much, Sir DPR, and we appreciate your proposal to invite the former responsible of the gender question to brief, inshallah, next session of our configuration about her effort in CAR, but also to enlighten us with maybe some proposals. Now I give the floor to DPR of Sweden.
Thank you, Ambassador, and thank you, Minister Baipo Temon, and all the other speakers, all protocols observed. Let me begin by thanking Morocco for your sustained leadership in the PBC on the Central African Republic. We welcome that the Commission once again will provide its advice in view of the mandate extension of MINUSCA. And we would like to see also this happening for other UN mandate extensions. We also appreciate the willingness of the government of CAR for consistently using the PBC as a platform to engage with partners on peace building and sustaining peace. This has been useful for our engagement, and we see many positive results thanks to the cooperation in this forum, especially in the legal sector. Notwithstanding the numerous challenges, we emphasize the importance of peaceful and inclusive environment in the upcoming election, including participation from civil society and the youth. This requires full respect of human rights, such as freedom of expression and freedom of association. Through the European Union, Sweden financially supports the realization of the elections. Full, effective, and meaningful participation of women in political life and society is critical. We're encouraged by the high share of women that so far have registered to vote in the elections. This serves as a model for other countries to follow. In this vein, we encourage MINUSCA and other actors to continue to apply a gender-sensitive and rights-based approach in peace-building activities and in the responses to COVID-19. Women are key actors in the response to the pandemic, and they are carrying an extremely heavy burden in caring for the sick. We appreciate the efforts of the government to include IDPs and refugees in the election, but understand that it will be very limited for the presidential elections. We do encourage all actors to do their utmost to enable Central African citizens living as refugees to participate in future elections. It's important that the high prevalence of gender-based violence and gender-based and sexual violence is not neglected. And we need to focus on protecting women, supporting victims, and also to support the investigation and justice sector to continue addressing such crimes. Sweden continues to support MINUSCA through our police team, which is specialized on sexual and gender-based violence. Already before COVID-19, we could note a worsening humanitarian situation in the Central African Republic. We continue to underscore the importance of a holistic humanitarian development peace nexus approach with shared efforts across mandates. This is also a prerequisite for effective implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals and, of course, in tackling COVID-19. We welcome the very close coordination between the World Bank, the IMF, the African Union, and the European Union when it comes to joint conflict assessments, conflict prevention, and efforts to sustain peace in CAR post-election. The Central African Republic is perhaps the foremost example of this joined-up approach in Africa. And we also underline the potential in further strengthening the partnership between the UN and the European Union in CAR. Finally, let me just welcome the important role of the Peacebuilding Fund. This is a flexible, risk-taking and catalytic instrument, and we fully support the synergies between the PBC and the PBF and underline the important activities of the fund in the Central African Republic. And I thank you very much.
I thank the DPR of Sweden. I don't know if my dear brother, the Ambassador of Congo, is here or not.
Yes.
Yes, please. Pleasure to hear you. Welcome, my dear brother.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, my dear brother Omar. We'll make some comments in French, if you don't mind.
Please,
je voudrais d'abord saluer l'exposé liminaire de Madame la ministre des Affaires étrangères et saluer aussi la présence du ministre secrétaire général du gouvernement ainsi que celle du représentant spécial du secrétaire général des Nations Unies. Je voudrais aussi saisir cette occasion pour saluer votre engagement à la tête de la configuration RCA. J'ai suivi avec grand intérêt les différentes interventions et présentations sur l'état de la RCA et je partage ces observations, les observations qui ont été faites par les orateurs précédents et je puis vous assurer de l'adhésion du Congo aux propositions et recommandations qui ont été faites dans le document qui nous ont été distribués. Comme vous le savez, les pays de la sous-région, dans le cadre de la communauté économique des États de l'Afrique centrale, le CEAC, et au niveau bilatéral, sont engagés au chevet de la RCA depuis que ce pays frère est confronté à des défis politiques, sécuritaires et socio-économiques. Au début de ce mois même, le Congo a pris une part active à la réunion ministérielle sur la RCA, co-présidée par le président Touadéra et le secrétaire général Guterres. À cette occasion, le ministre des Affaires étrangères, au nom du président de la République, avait fait observer que le processus de paix engagé en RCA, de paix et de réconciliation nationale bien que fortement engagé en RCA, ne demeurait pas moins exposé à des remises en cause par certains groupes armés. Aussi avait-il appelé la communauté internationale à redoubler d'initiatives pour contraindre tous les signataires de l'accord politique du 6 février 2019 à la mise en œuvre pleine et effective des engagements pris. Je voudrais ici réitérer le plein soutien du Congo à toutes les initiatives pouvant contribuer à l'aboutissement heureux du processus électoral. Le président Sassou Nguesso rencontre régulièrement son homologue et frère centrafricain et dans le souci d'un processus politique pacifique apaisé, il est aussi au contact avec différents leaders politiques de ce pays frère. C'est vous dire tout l'engagement de mon pays en RCA et que cet engagement est constant. Cet engagement qui se traduit d'ailleurs au plan bilatéral, notamment en ce qui concerne nos frontières communes, au niveau de nos frontières communes, une zone de paix et de prospérité à travers divers projets de développement dans le domaine des mines, des forêts et de la pêche. On ne le soulignera pas assez, l'importance de l'appui multidimensionnel, multiforme à la RCA afin de l'accompagner dans son relèvement socio-économique et de jeter des bases d'une période post-électorale de stabilité dans la paix et de paix durable. À cet égard, je me félicite des efforts financiers louables dans le cadre de fonds pour la consolidation de la paix et salue également les contributions des différents partenaires de la RCA qui l'accompagnent dans cette entreprise. Je vous remercie.
Voilà. Je remercie mon frère Raymond pour son intervention, pour les efforts de son pays avec le pays frère de la République centrafricaine. Now, I have the pleasure to give the floor to the DPR of Portugal.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Portugal fully aligns itself with the statement of the European Union and would like to add a few points in its national capacity. The upcoming elections in the CAR will be a key moment toward the consolidation of the democratic process. So we must all do our best to contribute to the holding of free, fair, inclusive, and credible elections. The political will and the commitment of all Central African political actors will therefore be essential. Dialogue and consensual solutions will be the way to prevent further violence, which could, as we know, destabilize the peace process and worsens the dire humanitarian situation. Like others, we regret that it has not been possible to ensure the electoral participation of Central African refugees. We encourage the continuation of efforts in that regard. The complex situation in the CAR still requires a strong security response, combined with profound efforts in institutional developments, the restoration of state authority, and development of initiatives which will bring concrete improvements to the daily life of Central Africans. The scale of the challenge is daunting, and the support from the international community must therefore remain steadfast. The unsteady security situation in some regions, particularly the Northeast, is a cause for concern. MINUSCA keeps playing a fundamental role in what regards both the protection of civilians and the full implementation of the peace process. That is why Portuguese military and police personnel have served in MINUSCA since 2017. Currently, we are there with 18 elements of the security forces and more than 180 troops, which serve as a quick reaction force. Portugal is also significantly involved in the EU CSDP mission. Portuguese nationals are currently heading both the UTM CAR and the new civilian CSDP missions in the CAR. This is currently our biggest security engagement in Africa. It is important that MINUSCA is seen as a credible security guarantor in the country, and that all disinformation campaigns that may corrupt that perceptions are fought and overcome. It is also important that we continue to capacitate MINUSCA with the adequate resources for the implementation of its mandate. In that context, allow me to congratulate you, Mr. Chairman, on the proposed written advice to the Security Council, in view of the upcoming renewal of the mandate of MINUSCA. In closing, allow me to reiterate that Portugal is and will remain committed and engaged in supporting the Central African authorities and its people in achieving their own vision of peace, stability, and development. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
C'est moi qui vous remercie, Monsieur Di-Piera, du Portugal. And now I give the floor to Canada. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for convening us today and bringing together such a fantastic lineup of briefers, as others before me have observed. Thank you to Her Excellency, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the SRSG, and others, in particular, civil society representation, which we believe is particularly important in this regard and at this time in the Central African Republic. At the outset, let me also express, in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic, Canada's solidarity with the government and people of the Central African Republic and those serving in MINUSCA and with the UN on the ground. My points are largely reinforcing those of others who've spoken before me, including on electoral inclusivity. We've noted the important gains in terms of women's participation. We believe there could be more, including youth participation in the upcoming national elections, but we are particularly dismayed with the lack of participation by refugees and vulnerable communities, including Muslim communities in the country. We'd like to look forward to their participation in future electoral processes in CAR. Furthermore, in terms of the elections, Mr. Chair, the post-electoral period is going to be particularly important from our perspective. Not only the confirmation of results, but carrying forward the process, as others have mentioned, including Japan and the World Bank, carrying forward the process into the next tranche of local elections in the country, which we deem to be key to the overall governance there. We'd like to congratulate you on your intention to provide advice to the Security Council in terms of the mandate renewal. And in that regard, in regard to the MINUSCA mandate, we'd like to see included a strategic coordination unit, something that we believe is in keeping with the A4P initiative recommendations of the C34, and indeed the comprehensive planning and performance assessment system that's spelled out in A4P. We believe that this is an important lesson learned from Mali, from MINUSMA, and that it has unlocked additional support and funding from the General Assembly through the 5th Committee for that mission, and it could potentially do so for MINUSCA as well. Finally, Mr. Chair, and I could have started with this point since it's so fundamental, so comprehensive, any advances in democracy or the rule of law in the Central African Republic must be underpinned or indeed facilitated by socioeconomic development. And we're glad you've included that in your points today. As you know, Canada is committed to UN system coherence around the world, but including on the ground in CAR, as well as with Jamaica leading on financing for development, something we believe is an initiative and an approach that can see and show gains. And lastly, we have a large bilateral international assistance program with the Central African Republic that's working towards this end to stabilizing the situation, providing new opportunities for the people of the country that will allow them to therefore engage further in the democratic and governance processes and strengthen and support the rule of law there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank Canada for his declaration, and now I give the floor to UK. UK, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and to our excellent panel of distinguished briefers today, including our civil society representative. Having been part of the Security Council discussion of the Central African Republic yesterday, it's very helpful timing to consider today the Peacebuilding Commission's advice on the MINUSCA mandate renewal and how the PBC can support CAR's progress towards peace and stability, and all of that from a broader perspective. We very much recognise that important complementarity between peace and security efforts on the one hand, and humanitarian development and peace-building efforts on the other. And only through long-term perspective with reconciliation, rule of law and economic development at its heart can peace be sustained. We therefore value the input of the PBC and also the role of the Peacebuilding Fund. We endorse the 4 areas of focus set out in the draft PBC advice to the Council. Firstly, on support to CAR's peace agreements. Full implementation of the 2019 Agreement for Peace and Reconciliation is the key to that long-term sustained peace. There's been progress, but also repeated violations by some armed groups, which we strongly condemn. We clearly need to keep emphasising the unequivocal international support for the agreement, and we need clear commitment from regional states and the agreement's co-guarantors. MINUSCA's ongoing role supporting the CAR authorities' implementation of the agreement is important. Local level initiatives to build inclusion and reconciliation are critical. The new decentralisation law is an important step forward, as are the first local elections planned since 1988 to help further local civic engagement. Secondly, as others have said, the December elections may be a key turning point for the country. We hope the vote will be free, fair, timely, inclusive and peaceful. We look to all actors to play their part in this. MINUSCA should continue to have a strong electoral support mandate. The UK has given well over $500,000 to the UNDP Elections Basket Fund, and we call on others to help address the remaining shortfall. Among other projects, this will support UN Women to promote the inclusion of women, youth and other underrepresented groups. But it is regrettable that Central African refugees cannot vote in this election. We hope this will be addressed in future elections to ensure they are truly representative. Thirdly, while the focus is on December elections, we mustn't lose sight of the urgent humanitarian needs. COVID-19 has compounded these, with more than half the country now food insecure, as our World Bank representative has highlighted today. Recently, the UK announced an extra $5 million of funding towards famine prevention, bringing our humanitarian contribution to the CAR this year to nearly $35 million. But funding is only worthwhile if it can reach the people it's intended to help. The scale of attacks on humanitarian actors is shocking. MINUSCA should be looking to enhance its role on facilitating delivery of humanitarian assistance, with protection of civilians at the core of its mandate. Lastly, long-term peace and stability means embedding the rule of law, instituting transitional justice and ending impunity. We welcome the steps taken to improve the Special Criminal Court and establish the Truth, Justice, Reparation and Reconciliation Commission. But human rights violations and abuses still persist, in particular sexual and gender-based violence. It is vital that the government continues to take action to ensure accountability in these cases, no matter the identity of the perpetrators. And we support MINUSCA's role in facilitating these efforts, including through use of the urgent temporary measures. The UK appreciates the integrated UN support from HQ to the field on rule of law through the UN Global Focal Point. This has enabled more sustainable peace-building engagement on security and justice issues at the country level. Such integrated approaches are critical. I want to finish by welcoming our briefers describing the strong collaboration of all actors on the ground. The PBC should continue to encourage a joined-up, coordinated effort across the UN and international partners, bringing together cross-sector support in a holistic and coherent way for maximum benefit and for lasting impact. Thank you, Chair.
I thank you, Key, for the declaration. And now I give the floor to Ireland.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Firstly, I would like to thank our distinguished briefers for their insightful presentations today. We'd also like to welcome your efforts, Chair, and those of the Peacebuilding Support Office in ensuring a balanced list of briefers, including from the national government, MINUSCA and civil society organisations. And this is really important to helping our consideration. Ireland pays tribute to the work of MINUSCA and its leadership in supporting peace in the Central African Republic. And we consider that the mission should be adequately supported to fulfil its important mandate. That's why we look forward to the upcoming renewal of the mandate based on the sound advice that you have prepared for the Security Council from this Commission. I'd like to make a few quick points, if I may, most of which have already been made by our previous speakers, and I just want to reinforce those. As almost everyone before me has said, the importance of elections in the Central African Republic is lost on no one for ensuring a lasting, durable peace. To this end, we welcome the good progress that has been made in voter registration efforts since our last meeting, and it is particularly encouraging that so many women have been registered. Though we do share the concerns raised by others that refugees will be unable to participate mostly in the next set of elections. We call for all reasonable efforts to be taken to increase the inclusivity of the voting process and to ensure that all groups are afforded the opportunity to vote. But let us also not forget that inclusive elections do not only mean that all groups have the opportunity to vote, it also means that all, most particularly women, have the opportunity to stand for election. And we encourage more efforts in that regard. And we were indeed encouraged by the statistics that were given to us earlier today. The point I'd like to focus on, though, is on the humanitarian situation in the country. A few others have raised it, but this has been driven by the impact and the response to the pandemic, which has exacerbated existing inequalities. Food supply chains have been disrupted, and as we've heard earlier, we can expect floods later in the year to make this situation even worse. One critically important need right now is addressing the humanitarian funding gap. We have committed over 24 million to the Central African Republic since 2016, supporting internally displaced people, returnees, and vulnerable communities. But as others have said, the protection of humanitarian workers must be prioritized. The Central African Republic is now one of the most dangerous countries in the world to be a humanitarian worker. Each day we see aid workers risking their lives to assist those most in need. And as long as they are being targeted, aid agencies cannot effectively operate and help the most vulnerable. Respect for international humanitarian law and humanitarian access must simply be guaranteed. My final point is on justice. As others have said, a strong justice system founded on the principles of fair access and equal treatment for all is crucial to ending impunity and to securing the progress made in the implementation of the peace agreement. We welcome the briefers' inputs today on progress that has been made so far on SSR and justice reforms, and we support the urgent temporary measures in place and urge all parties to make the necessary efforts to increase the confidence of Central Africa, in particular women and girls in the justice system. Thank you.
I thank Ireland for his declaration. Ireland was the last on my list. Is there any other delegation who would like to take the floor? If not, I will ask the briefers if they have any reaction or comments. We'll be very happy to hear them, but they have to be very brief. Special representative of the Secretary General, Monker, would you like to say some words?
Merci bien, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président, nous apprécions toutes les réactions que nous avons entendues à la suite de nos différentes présentations. Comme je l'ai signalé, nous sommes sur la ligne droite vers les élections présidentielles et législatives avec un chronogramme qui est déjà rendu public. Et nous souhaiterons vraiment appeler tous les acteurs politiques à s'inscrire dans cette dynamique. Et nous allons travailler également pour qu'un code de conduite puisse être signé entre tous les candidats à l'élection présidentielle quand la liste définitive des candidats sera arrêtée par la Cour constitutionnelle le 3 décembre. Nous lançons un appel à la poursuite du dialogue politique entre tous les acteurs politiques et sociaux de la République centrafricaine. Nous donnons l'assurance que nous avons avec le gouvernement élaboré et adopté un plan de sécurisation intégré des élections que nous déroulons actuellement. Et nous voulons donner l'assurance à tous les acteurs, et surtout à la communauté internationale, que toutes les dispositions seront prises justement pour assurer la sécurité sur tout le territoire national pour que les élections présidentielles et législatives puissent se dérouler avec le maximum de sécurité. Et donc, nous sommes vraiment pleins dans le processus préparatoire et nous pensons que toutes les conditions sont réunies pour avoir des élections libres, démocratiques, transparentes le 27 décembre prochain. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le représentant spécial, le secrétaire général. Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres intervenants parmi les briefers?
With your permission, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please, and briefly.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Again, I mean, once again, I would like, first of all, to support what are our SRSG for MINUSCA just expressed, and just to add that we appreciate very much, we took good note, and we appreciate very much all statements in support of rule of law components of MINUSCA work in Central African Republic, and especially through our attempts to be coherent with other UN family members and to deliver this support to police, justice, and corrections, as well as in other areas as security sector reform and DDR, in a full coordination and cooperation with other UN agencies, funds, and programs, especially through the global focal point arrangement, which was just kindly mentioned by the British and other delegates. So thank you again, and we took good note of all the recommendations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Assistant Secretary General. Any other comments? I see none. So I will just say or share with you a few comments. We have had very informative, substantial, and very comprehensive discussions on the situation in CAR at the eve of the incoming elections. And here I would like to say 4 or 5 comments. First of all, we are very happy to see that everybody is agree that CAR is leading to resolutely to the elections in conformity with deadlines and the constitutions. We appreciate the guarantees and the assurances given by the Minister of Foreign Affairs on the name of the government. And at the same time, we would like to express our appreciation for the role played by the civil society. And our sister who spoke on behalf of the civil society today gives us the impression that there is real ownership of the elections by the women and youth. And I would like to say that we count on her to continue her mobilization for women to for her registration, but also to increase the number of the candidates of women. And here I would like to congratulate the PBF fund, because the funding of the mobilization and the coaching of women was very crucial to reach such a level. Second observation, I would like to thank warmly my dear brother Moncoeur, SRSGZ, for all the measures and actions that he took with the MINUSCA in all its components to prepare the elections in terms of security, in terms of dialogue with the government, and especially the agreements that have been done, and also in following the preparation closely in all parts of the country. I would like here to tell him just 2 small remarks. First of all, please, the question of protection of the humanitarian community is very crucial, very important. And we need to protect those who come to help. And I believe that the MINUSCA have done a good job of protection of these workers, humanitarian workers. But we just want the MINUSCA to do more, because we need such workers, such volunteers to continue their job in CAR. The other observation, I would like to assure him that we will insist on his request and the request of so many delegations on having or in renewing and confirming the MINUSCA mandate for the its electoral role during the elections. I think it will just confirm what the MINUSCA have been doing, but reaffirming that in the new resolution will be a recognition of its role. My third observation is dealing regarding the votes of refugees and displaced population. We took note of the effort of the government and hope that it will be possible to ensure that all Central Africans will be able to vote for the local elections. I would like here to praise the personal involvement of His Excellency the President of the Republic of Central Africa in this field. My fourth observation is I would like to flag that we note with a lot of appreciation that the unanimity among the members of the Security Council in supporting the role of MINUSCA and also bringing the accompanying the MINUSCA in the preparation of the elections, and the fact that we have this unanimity in the Security Council is very important point that needed to be mentioned. My fifth comment is dealing with the advice that we are preparing to be submitted to the Security Council. Of course, we took note of your comments, and we will do our best to forward this right and advice of the PBC to the Security Council. And I think this exercise is becoming tradition, and the CAR configuration is giving the example and the token that varies, as what we heard this morning, this complementarity between Security Council and the PBC, but especially this very important role of the PBC to bring some added value to the work of the Security Council. My sixth observation is to renew, as it had been requested from so many among you, among the members and among also the MINUSCA, renew the engagement of the CAR configuration to continue sensitizing, engaging, mobilizing all the stakeholders in CAR, but also stakeholders and partners outside CAR. And I mean here the members and all these countries who are helping, supporting financially the Central African Republic, and especially this very important and very noble objective of organizing the elections. And here I would like to raise the need for more mobilization for financial resources for the fund. As you know, and as it has been raised this morning by many briefers and delegations, we still need 4 million for the presidential elections and 17 million for the legislative and local elections. And I count on all of you to not let down the people of Central African Republic and to help them to organize very transparent, very fair, and very inclusive elections. But to do so, we need the nerve of democracy. The nerve of democracy is financing these elections. My last observation is just to tell you that we were thinking to organize visits to Central African Republic by myself and some members of the configuration. But unfortunately, because of the COVID, it seems that it will not be possible. But in meantime, and in waiting better time for organize it, we are about organizing a virtual visit to Central African Republic. You will be informed very soon about the modus operandi of such virtual visits. I would conclude by saying that I remain at your disposal for any comments, proposals, or requests. And I would like to thank warmly all the briefers, all the delegations, and I would like also to thank to ask Moncoeur to forward the appreciation of the configuration to all the staff of the MINUSCA. We appreciate what they are doing, and we are with them, and we recognize their very important role, not only in building peace there and securing the country, but also in building democracy and preparing such important and crucial election for the future of this country. My last word will be for the PBSO, without whom we would not be able to organize such important meeting with very eminent briefers, high responsible, and also very involved and committed PRs, DPRs, and missions. So once again, thank you very much. Wish you good evening to Bangui and good afternoon to everybody here. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Moncoeur.